So welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our event. It's See Yourself in STEM. I am the moderator. I'm also the CEO of Engineering World Health, where our mission is really to empower the biomedical engineering community to, innovate and really change the environment in low resource healthcare settings. And so we focus on that a lot, but we also focus on STEM outreach and really seeing yourself in STEM at all stages, from kindergarten all the way through your professional career, and what that can look like across the world. So that was kind of the inspiration for today's event. And we are, lucky to have really great panelists today who have all had some sort of involvement with us in some capacity in the past, years of our existence. We've been around for 20 years. So with that, Rachel, who's also with EWH, will introduce herself and share a little bit about the panelists.
Thank you, Tojan. My name is Rachel. I am the Development and Communications Manager at Engineering World Health. And I'm going to introduce each of our panelists. And after each introduction, panelists, if you'd like to say a few words about yourself and your work, please feel free to do so. So first, it is my pleasure to introduce Deanna Hood. Deanna is a senior robotics and software engineer passionate about using tech for good and inspiring others to do the same. She spent the past 13 years bringing creativity and innovation to engineering's most exciting applications, including as a core software engineer on ROS-2, now used in NASA's Viper mission, designing a robotic partner for children with handwriting difficulties, using electronics to support cancer researchers, developing a low-cost USB stethoscope for diagnosing pneumonia in children in Mozambique, and most recently, she worked on a skin printing robot for burn patients. That is a long list of amazing achievements, Deanna. Because of all those great achievements, she was named Australian Young Engineer of the Year. Deanna also participated in EWH's 2015 Summer Institute in Nicaragua. Deanna, thank you so much for being with us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Yeah, thank you. If you could go back a slide, please. I feel like you've done most of the introduction for me, but to summarize, I am an engineer who has worked on lots of different things, and I think that's part of the beauty of engineering. I've found out is that one skill set can be applied to lots of different applications. So I have intentionally worked on all the different projects that you've seen on the screen, including most recently a skin printing robot for burns patients, applying my interest in technology to help society in a bunch of different ways. And we'll probably touch on it a bit later, but I got into this by accident, never really heard of engineering before I finished high school. And maybe part of that is that I finished school a few years early, and I turned 15 on the night of my high school prom equivalent in Australia. So an unusual path for me, but I'm happy to tell you more about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Deanna. Next up, I'm going to introduce Patience Niyigena. So Patience is passionate about working with organizations that use healthcare technology to impact society and save people's lives. She currently works as a flight operator at Zipline, a logistics company with the mission to provide every person on Earth with instant access to vital medical supplies. At Zipline, Patience ensures that delivery of medical products to hospitals via aircraft is done in a safe and timely manner. She has a degree in electrical and electronics engineering from Rwanda Polytechnic and has previously served as an underground coordinator for EWH Summer Institutes and a virtual program coordinator with Engineering World Health.
Currently, I am based in Rwanda, and I'm working at Zipline. It's the world's largest logistics company, which have the mission of providing every human on the earth with the instant access on medical supplies. Zipline operates in different countries. We have the distribution centers in Rwanda. We also have the others in Ghana, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Kenya, and in the US in different states. My role to assemble the critical parts of the zip or drone. We used to call it zip technically here in Zipline, but also doing the ground maintenance and also doing the zip maintenance, both both routine maintenance or monthly maintenance and the curative or corrective maintenance. Any question I can have about this, please do not hesitate to ask me. Yes. Apart from that, I'm also a biomedical technician. Yes.
So I'm going to move on and introduce Glen Rabito. Glen has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Kettering University and a master's in engineering management from Duke University. He is currently the director of engineering and operations for an early stage medical device incubator, NXT Biomedical, located in Irvine, California, where their mission is to incubate unique and impactful medical device innovation in a cost and time efficient manner. Glen participated in EWH's 2006 Summer Institute in Tanzania and is currently on the EWH board of directors. Welcome, Glen. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And thanks for the intro. I'm not sure if I can add too much, but I'm excited for the conversation and tell you about my journey through trying to figure out if STEM was right for me and the wonderful things that we can do with our skill set here to help patients out in the world. So thank you.
Awesome. So we've got Jen Moody. Jen has 17 years of industry experience focused on enabling cell and gene therapies. Her experience has spanned the value chain from reagent development and raw material sourcing through therapeutic product development. She's currently head of external innovation, genomic medicine at Danaher Corporation and is based in Toronto, Canada. She is a stem cell scientist by training, having completed a PhD in genetics from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver and a postdoc in Lund, Sweden. We're so glad you could join us, Jen. Is there anything you want to share that before we get started?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I'm honored to be here today and honored that you've included me as I'm not an engineer, but I hang around with a lot of them. Really excited today to tell you about my journey and how I got here, how I never pictured I would get here either, and the world that I work in, which is, bioengineering and bioprocess engineering, really. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you all for joining us, audience and, panelists. So with that, let's get started. And so the first question I have for the panelists, and the panelists feel free to answer whichever question kind of speaks to you. You don't have to answer all the questions. But our first question is right on point with the theme of our event today, right? Many studies have been done on what contributes to someone being successful in STEM, so in science, technology, engineering, and math. And a surprising factor, and also not so surprising, is self-esteem and self-efficacy. That belief that you can achieve a certain goal and you can identify as a scientist or engineer. Those are very critical to being successful in STEM. I know personally as an engineer, when I realized that I was an engineer and a scientist was when I was doing like outreach with little kids and they called me a scientist and they said, "Oh, you're a scientist." And I was like, 19 or 20 years old and they were like 6. And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm a scientist." And that took me like a minute. And that's where my identity started becoming more solid because of a little kid, and pushed me down the path of STEM outreach. So my question to you is, when did you begin to see yourself in STEM? What stage in your education or career did you decide that, I'm going to go after a STEM career? What did that look like? And I know, like Jen, you mentioned you weren't trained in engineering, but you pursued something in the STEM world. So would be very curious to hear kind of what was that spark moment that said, I'm going to go down the STEM journey. This is when I saw myself in STEM. So whoever wants to answer first from our panelists, by all means. Don't be shy.
I think we're all going to be too polite. You got to pick somebody.
Okay, just started talking to you.
All right. Yeah. So for me, it was also kind of by chance. I was in high school and thinking, okay, I have to get a job. I got to figure out what I'm going to do in life. And so my parents pushed me really hard to consider, what do you enjoy, right? We just want you to be happy. And there was kind of 2 things that floated to mind. One was I really liked art at the time. And so I thought about going to art school for a minute. And then the other thing was I really, really loved just working on my car and tinkering and trying to figure out how to make it go faster. And so I kind of had these 2 things battling in my mind. So I went to engineering colleges and then I went to art schools and recognized really, really quickly that I was not going to be an artist compared to everybody else that was applying to these schools. And so I kind of fell back on my love for just understanding how things are working, trying to figure out analytically how we could make them better. And I went to Kettering University, where I studied mechanical engineering, got involved in the automotive industry, and learned kind of that analytical problem solving. Really cool experience. But there wasn't that spark for me, or that continued interest in that industry. And so I ended up going back to grad school, and part of that experience at Duke, I got connected with EWH. And I'd say for me, that was my real spark. I had the pleasure of going out to Tanzania and working in the hospitals there. And I could apply my skill set as an engineer to be able to come alongside the people working at the hospital, repair equipment, brainstorm, fix things on the fly. And again, for me, the light bulb went off of, hey, I can use my skill set as an engineer to be able to actually have an impact on people's lives. And it just seems really, really valuable thing to do in this world. And so I immediately, once I got home, started interviewing at any med tech company that I could, and fortunately landed a career in the cardiovascular space. And ever since then, I've never looked back. And so I just hope that everybody here can kind of have that similar spark and experience one day.
I love that. Thanks for sharing, Glenn. And I love how EWH impacts your experience, and we'll get into that in a little bit as well. Jen, Deanna, Patience, does anyone else want to share kind of when they saw themselves in STEM and pushed themselves down that path?
Sure, I've got a few. It's an interesting question because it differed at different times of my life. So the first time that I can think of it, where the spark was around science, I was in high school biology class, and the teacher had us do an exercise where we put a piece of bread underneath our tongue, and we had to hold it there until you tasted the sugar. And when you would raise your hand when you tasted the sugar. And it was a demonstration of the enzyme amylase breaking down the starch in the bread and converting it into sugar. And it was like a real world demonstration of the reaction she had just put on the board. And I remember that was a spark where I went, cool. And then I pictured every other enzyme in my body working on that piece of bread. And then I'm like, I can get into that, which surprised me because I wouldn't have actually thought I was going to be a biologist. I was the one who screamed when I had to cut into the fetal pig. And I would not have predicted that biology would have been my path. There's a couple of other ones throughout my career, the encouragement to go do a PhD when I didn't see that as something I would do. It was something that somebody else saw in me and encouraged me to do. And I was at a stage of my life where I needed somebody to guide me and doing that. And that was, when I enrolled, then I realized, you know what, I think they were right. And then the third one came even later when I had my first job and launched my first product. That I was at Stem Cell Technologies in Vancouver, and we launched a product that essentially was a media for culturing cells. And it changed the way the world cultured embryonic stem cells or pluripotent stem cells. And since then, it enabled a whole field, essentially. And that's when that was another spark where I was like, okay, I can make a big difference here. And that has been my passion ever since. So it didn't all happen when I was early. That one happened, I was in my mid-30s when I launched that product. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I love that real world application in the classroom to really trigger that thought process.
That's I have, you made me think of some things, Jen, just around like having people encourage you, and that sometimes other people see your spark for something before you see it yourself. And I think about this a lot because I really like maths, but growing up I didn't realize that other people didn't like maths because I was just, you only know what's inside your head, and sometimes you need the help of, I don't know, wiser people who see the broader society to be like, actually, this is unique about you. This is something that's special about you. And for me, I feel really fortunate that I had those people around me, in my family particularly, pushing me in that direction, because otherwise it's like, how does somebody who had never heard of engineering become Young Engineer of the Year? How does that happen? And the answer is someone else knew best, like was saying, hey, why don't you consider this? And like Glen, I didn't start from like the engineering knowing, oh yeah, I really like engineering. I started knowing I like understanding things. And that when I was younger, I would just sit and want to know how things work. And that I have come to realize, like, wanting to know how things work is an important step before you can design and improve things as engineers do. And that is something that apparently is like not true for everyone. So that I've only realized even as an adult, okay, that apparently was my spark, but other people saw it before me. And then I think that like journey of happy accidents, we probably all have that in common. And a lot of my outreach is to high school students, and they're just thinking like, how do I get from not knowing anything about life to becoming, you know, whoever it is that they look up to? And the answer is just, it's like one random choice at a time for most people. And I'm definitely no exception in that. I never planned out anything like the path that was on the slideshow before. You just like pick something that sounds cool at the time. Okay, this project is like jumping out at me. I'll work on that one. Now this project's jumping out on me. I'll work on the next one. And then after time, you're like, oh, apparently now I'm an engineer. So, yeah.
I love that. And I think I'm going to take us to the next part of this, because you said something about you had people pushing you, you know, in that path, or seeing that spark to help you see yourself in STEM. And so, you know, there's a lot of research out there, right, that that girls have fewer role models to inspire their interest in STEM. And help them see themselves as a scientist and engineer. There hasn't been many examples in, you know, books, media, popular culture, even fewer women of color in these positions. And so in that conversation, and along with one of the members of the audience just asking right now about, you know, being a person of color and a woman in STEM, and imposter syndrome and doubt, and finding your path in STEM, I want to ask, you know, what is the advice we can give students or young professionals to find a mentor in their field, to make most out of the mentorship? Because I truly believe having that mentorship will help alleviate some of that imposter syndrome, because someone else will see your spark, and someone else will tell you, you know, your weaknesses and your strengths, and help you work on them. So I want to ask you, and then ask the other panelists, you know, what advice do you have to students to really seek that mentorship, and what does a good mentorship look like for them?
Yeah, so there's kind of, I see things mathematically, and I've come to think recently of an expression, mathematical expression, that sort of keeps people in the game of tricky situations. And that's that your motivation outweighs like the difficulties that you're facing. And so my opinion on how we can support anyone who is and like traditionally underrepresented path of whatever type in engineering or STEM in general is one of those two. So you either like reduce the barriers and make it that, okay, there's less drag on this person's experience. And examples of that would be, let me think. So for me, being in support circles of other women engineers makes my life easier, because then I go to these events and I feel like I'm not alone in my experiences. So being able to share my experiences with other people, that makes the challenge less difficult. And then the other thing is that we are all capable of doing very difficult things and pushing through very difficult situations when we're motivated to do so. And you were saying that people don't always see themselves as engineers. And I think one of the problems that we have as a society is that people sometimes don't see themselves as engineers because they don't know about it, or even once they know about it, they don't understand that engineers can impact people. So they don't want to see themselves as an engineer because they'd rather see themselves as a more prestigious or altruistic career. So if we can increase people's motivation for staying in the discipline by like connecting them actually with the impact that they can have in the world like we're doing today, then I think that's the other part of the equation, like the other lever that we can pull.
Thank you. No, that was great. Patience, did you want to also answer this?
Oh, that's great. And that's a good question. The first thing that I want to say about having a mentorship or having a mentor is just a great way to gain the insights and their motivation and inspiration in the STEM. So the first advice that I can give them is just to start by looking for the industry's events and professional organizations. I can mention some of them like Future You, Women in Tech, Power Her. Currently in Rwanda, we also have one which is called Women in Engineering, or other networking opportunities where they can connect with their experienced professionals. The other thing, once they have like found their potential mentors, they can be clear about their goals and expectations and ask the thoughtful questions to their mentors. And they can also be open to the constructive feedback and also use the mentorship to set and achieve the realistic career goals in the STEM. Finally, something that I can add on is just to remember that the mentorship is just a two-way street, so that they can be sure to offer their own skills and insight to the mentors as well, to be able to know what they really want in their journey.
That was great. Thank you. And I appreciate the last bit of your answer about mentorship being a two-way street, tying back to identifying as a scientist or an engineer. When you mentor other students or other people, you can re-emphasize your identity as a STEM person or an engineer. So it's a two-way street. I want to ask the next question to Jen, and I think Glen as well, but the factoid we have is that, there's a lot of barriers to entry in STEM and a lot of reasons why students don't completely participate or pursue a STEM degree. Either they're not prepared for the courses, or they find it more challenging than expected, or they don't fit in, or they aren't receiving the support and encouragement from the people around them. So I want to ask if there was any struggle with any challenges or barriers on your own STEM journeys, since they were very unique. And what advice would you give to someone who is feeling unprepared or lacking resources? And I know, Glen, you talked about EWH a little bit, so I'm going to have Jennifer answer first, and then we'll segue to EWH's involvement in that for you.
Great. Yeah, this is a great question. And just thinking back to, at times where I felt challenged, and I'm thinking in particular, an example of second year organic chemistry, which to a biologist who loved her enzymes, that should have come more easily to me than it was coming to me. And I remember I was 3 days away from the midterm exam, and I had so many different exams, and I was like, I am host. Like, there is no way I'm gonna pass this exam. And I remember there was a really, really smart guy in the class, Jason, and I considered him a friend. And he was the guy who got into med school after 2 years, kind of thing. And he could do this. And I just remember having a conversation, and I was like, I'm lost. And so I had to express that vulnerability to the smartest guy in the class and tell him, I'm lost. I'm going to fail this thing. And he sat me down and he said, Jen, this is how I think about it. And everybody's brain works at different ways. And I've come to appreciate this over the years, that people think about things and tackle things in really different ways. And him sitting down with me for 15 minutes and telling me how he managed it. And he said, look, if you just do this, try doing this. And I went and I locked myself in a room for like 2 days. And I wrote every reaction across the top and every reaction across the bottom of the whiteboard. And then one by one, I worked out how to convert one into another. I remember this like at the back of my hand. I don't remember any of the reactions, truth be told, but I did that for 2 days. I aced the exam. And had I not had that conversation with him about, because I just couldn't get my mind on the right, in the right frame. And it just took talking to somebody who I could identify could do it and having them explain to me how his brain got around it. And it was, so I guess the lesson there for me is, number one, if you're struggling or if you're feeling overwhelmed, find somebody who's good at it. It also goes to the mentor thing. Mentors come in all different kinds of forms, right? People think of a mentor as like a professor emeritus that, can advise you on your career. But Jason Berman that day was a mentor to me for organic chemistry. And I've had many that, friends and colleagues that are mentors to me on a regular basis, all for different things. And you find somebody who does something really well and try and learn from them. And appreciate the fact that, that angle, that people's brains work differently and people tackle things. And sometimes if you just can't get it to go, maybe you just need to learn how to approach it from a different way.
I love that. That's great advice on all fronts. And I think very, very true that mentors come in all shapes and forms. And sometimes you never realize who was actually a mentor for you. So that's awesome. And I love that. I personally was a nerd and I loved organic chemistry, but I'll leave it at that. Glen, do you want to touch on a little bit about your journey into STEM and, any barriers or kind of advice you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing I just wanted to highlight, it seems like just like anything in life, people are a big part of the equation, right? And so whether it's a mentor or just surrounding yourself with good people that are passionate about what they're doing is always going to be a good thing. And yeah, big part of my journey as well. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I couldn't decide if I wanted to be an artist or an engineer early on. But I had to figure it out. And I think one of the big learnings in retrospect of how I got where I am is I just kept letting my kind of curiosity guide me, right? I was curious again, how things were working. I had no clue what an engineer was when I signed up to be an engineer, right? My dad was a photographer. My mom was keeping the books for our family business. And I told him, I said, I think I want to go to engineering college. We're like, great. I don't know what that is. You don't know what that is. You got to go figure that out. And so I did. I just was very curious about the field, the space, and along the way, I got to meet some really interesting people. They were working on cool projects. And again, just following that kind of curiosity. And I think, you brought up this idea of imposter syndrome, 100%. I think even today, I could admit that I still struggle with it to some extent, right? It's okay to fake it until you make it, right? Because I think as long as you're curious and you're going to have that passion to just keep uncovering these stones, and you'll figure it out. I think the humans are incredibly resilient and brilliant at just persevering through the unknowns of these things. And so again, I think, just letting your curiosity kind of guide you towards your purpose. And then once that clicks for you, it's a beautiful thing.
I love that. Thank you, Glen. Deanna, our patients, do you want to share anything in relevance to this question about, your trip to pursue STEM?
Yeah, I can echo what Jen was saying, that like mentors look like lots of different things, and that sometimes to find them, you just need to put yourself in an environment where there are people around. and then if you talk to people, then you also talk about your problems, and they might not even help you. I think what's really powerful I've found about these support groups for minorities is that sometimes just having someone listen to you and be like, yeah, that sounds hard. Like that has been a saving grace for me through my whole career. And maybe this time last year, I specifically was at home Googling women in engineering groups in Sydney. Like, I need to talk to someone just to know, like, am I imagining things? Are other people feeling the same way as me? And that those, like, I'm lucky that I was in Sydney and then there were 3 in-person events in the next month, but I also attend events online just by different lean-in circles across the world of women paying it forward because they've received the same support, mentorship, encouragement, like they're the same realm when they were going through their career. But it also comes from men as well, in giving this like guidance for career or listening to your problems. Like, that doesn't just come from these support groups, but that's some of the times that I have most like intentionally sorted out for like support for myself. So these things, they're like common themes that are happening to all of us that we didn't, it's just all of these accidents. None of us know what we're doing. Like, it's all just one step at a time. And sometimes the most useful mentors can be just one step above you, like that one step ahead. So it's like, how did you make it through first year of university? Because that's what I need to focus on right now. I'm not looking to like go for my second PhD or something, like just that next step. And once you've thought of it, go to Google and find, like, try to be explicit in that search for it, to know what you're looking for as a first step, and then just like execute the search.
Yeah, no, that's definitely valid advice. With that notion of like, pursuing our STEM careers and seeing ourselves in STEM, 3 of the panelists actually have direct ties to EWH in that they participated in our programming. So I know, Glen, you participated in our Tanzania Summer Institute in 2006. For those of you unfamiliar, our summer institutes is where you go to the country for 9 weeks. Typically, you take a technical class for 4 weeks and you learn some language skills, and then you do a lab, and then you go into the hospitals for 5 weeks and repair equipment in teams. And so I know, Glen, you joined us in 2006 in Tanzania, and now you're on EWH's board of directors. Deanna, you went to Nicaragua with us in 2015. You've stayed in touch with us, and Patience, you've served as on-the-ground coordinator for several of our programs, as well as virtual program coordinator during COVID. So with all of this, I have to ask, how has EWH's, your experience with Engineering World Health really shaped your STEM journeys? And by all means, I'd love you all to kind of answer. Mm-hmm. Patience, do you want to start us off if you're...
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. That's a very interesting question. Apart from how EWH has contributed to me in the technical skills that I gained when I was both a volunteer and an OTG, so another brand coordinator, it also helped me to know how to manage all the problems as they arise, and also it also builds up my leadership skills. The other thing that I can add on EWH did for me, currently, as if I told you I'm working with Zipline, I joined, EWH plays a very big role for me to join Zipline, because for the first time I hadn't heard about Zipline, and I didn't have any clear picture of idea of what Zipline do. During summer institute programs, when I was an underground coordinator, some of the student volunteers used to ask me to take them to Zipline because they were seeing that the drones or zips were dropping the packages or the deliveries at the hospitals where they were serving. So at that time, I took them to the Zipline. Then I got the clear picture of what Zipline does and how it's very impactful to the society and in the healthcare technology as well. And I finally found myself by joining Zipline since I got convinced of what I have seen, and I was with my team as my team from EWH as Zipline at that moment. So that was EWH did for me.
Thanks, Patience. We're always so glad to have you participate in our programming, and I think you always bring a different perspective to the program, especially during COVID and the virtual programs. So thank you for sharing your experience with it. Deanna and Glen, do you want to share?
You said my name first, so I unmuted. Yeah, participating in the EWH Summit in Nicaragua changed my life in two specific ways. Personality-wise, I have studied electrical engineering and then specialized in robotics, but I never felt confident in touching anything. And when I went to Nicaragua, what the beauty of that experience for me was that I was free to not know things. And I feel like this gets in the way of people's confidence becoming engineers, because if you don't feel like you're in a place where you can not know, then it makes it a bit hard to progress to the next level. So for me, I went there, no one else was around to repair things, and so I took them apart and they were already broken, and so what was the worst that could happen? And I ended up fixing things just from looking. There was a slide when we came in of just people looking at a device like, why is this broken? I loved it. It was the best 2 months of my life, just figuring out why things were broken as a prerequisite for then repairing them. And I have brought that with me into my everyday life. I pick things up off the street and repair them and sell them on Marketplace, because it is the most fun way to make money aside from my day job. And I wouldn't have done that before I got that confidence, and I didn't get that confidence at university. I got that confidence from this like extracurricular activity. And that's the advice that I give to anyone who's like in that imposter syndrome state, is like, well, how can you put yourself in an environment where you're not expected to know anything? And a lot of the time that looks like just hobby projects. What can you build for yourself that you can take as long as you want? You can Google as many things as you want just to build that confidence. And then the second way, could you bring up a slide on Rostrum, please? The second way is that I met a friend in Nicaragua who is, his name is Zach, artist from Sydney. And years later, I called him up and we were talking about life. I asked him what he was up to, and he said, I'm working on this bioprinter for cancer researchers that you can see here is used by some researchers at the Children's Cancer Institute to develop new treatments. And it does that by printing these tiny droplets the size of a pinhead. And it does that because of engineers. And when he told me that, I was like, sign me up. We went to work together, and that's a picture of like some other engineers working on the internals of the system in the bottom left, because that's the part of the system that I want to be working on. Whereas some people, like we work with stem cell researchers and they're at the front of the printer. I've never operated the printer. I want to be working on the electronics behind that. So that connection through EWH of just people who enjoy similar things to me then actually like impacted my career. But the fun was worth it nonetheless.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, so you never know what opportunity is going to send you down a path or create a connection in the future. Back to mentors and your network. I think this is point proven here is like, you never know, you'll meet someone on a trip and it's an EWH trip, and you never know down the line how your paths will cross again. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. That was great. Glen?
Yeah, I just got to say too, this brings such a huge smile to my face hearing all of these different EWH stories and how it's impacted lives. I knew I wasn't the only one, but it's good to hear it firsthand. Yeah, I kind of already alluded to it earlier, but I guess in summary, there's like my top 5 life experiences. One was getting married to my lovely wife. The other 3 are having my children. And then like EWH makes the top 5 list of really cool life-changing experiences for me. And I mean that honestly. Like when I was talking about earlier of, letting your curiosity lead you towards your passion and purpose, like EWH was that last puzzle piece for me of, all right, engineering is really cool, automotive, not really feeling it, but it's a really interesting field. There's something here. What do? I got involved with EWH, did the SI Summer Institute over in Tanzania. And again, just like firework explosion of, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm an engineer to help people. I can use my skill set to make these devices to be able to do that. And so here I am, 15 years into my med tech career. I landed myself in the cardiovascular space, and I'm fortunate and definitely lucky to say that I've worked on some products that have helped millions of patients to date, and hope to continue to do that. And so I'd say for all of you college students on the line, or potential college students, or even people in industry, like I'd love to figure out a way to get involved with EWH, whether it's through summer institutes or in other capacities, just because it's changed my life, and it sounds like it's done the same for a lot of people on the call here.
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, no, definitely happy to hear that, and hopefully more folks get to experience that as well. And Jen, I'm not going to leave you out of this. I think we're going to have you on one of our trips soon here. We got to get
you got to sign me up. I feel like I've been missing out.
But what do you want to share anything about kind of some experience you've had that kind of sparks your path a little bit, just so that you can kind of share a little bit more about your journey?
Yeah, so I think what I alluded to it earlier, sort of launching that first product that really enabled the field was a big hook for me. And there's some commonalities that have fallen out of that. That was a technology that was in an academic research lab that was successfully commercialized and actually changed the way people cultured those cells and changed the field of pluripotent stem cell biology. And the company that I'm at right now, it's an amazing company called Danaher. And if you hadn't heard of it, it's the parent company to a suite of other companies that are enabling the field of life sciences, in the field in particular of genomic medicine. Companies such as Cytiva and Paul and Beckman and Leica and IDT and Molecular Devices. There's a long list of them. Really, really exciting role. And I spent some time, in therapeutic startups and in incubators, but I'm back in the space of enablement. And it's such an exciting area, in particular in this role that I'm in Danaher, really enabling the researchers that are developing these therapies, and the hand that we can have in developing products that allow people to do that faster, quicker, more economically, such that you can translate those therapies into the clinic faster and get them into patients. The impact that has is really rewarding, and that's what drives me in the role that I'm in right now. I'm working with these academic institutes still to translate inventions that become enabling products that drive this field forward. So my big thing is, I started out as a genetics major, cell biology geek, stem cell geek. And in the span of my lifetime, I'm going to watch, through work that I'm doing, watch that curiosity eventually translate into a change in the fundamental way that medicine is practiced. And I'm going to see that in the span of my career, and I will have contributed to it, and it's really rewarding.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I think one common theme we've seen today in everyone's answers and discussion is, being an engineer, being in STEM doesn't prevent you from impacting your community and impacting the greater world, really. And I think that's also something that Engineering World Health prides itself in doing, is showing engineers, what's the out of the box thinking that can make what you're working on impactful across the world and relevant to the rest of the world. And so I do want to highlight that common theme today and ask the panelists one last question in a few words, perhaps. Really, what has been the most exciting part of your journey, and what are you looking forward to? And it could be like, a one-word answer, like I'm excited to be more innovative, or it could be a more detailed answer. Who would like to start? I just stop asking that.
Yeah, I'll go. No, I'll go. Can you share? Because another way to phrase it is like, what makes me get out of bed every day? And that for me, if you can bring up the Lego slide, that for me is to work on robots, which is not the same as working on like skin cells. For me, I get out of bed to do the technology that enables these medical devices. I'm not looking to do the science. I'm not looking to be a doctor. I'm looking to do the technology. This is some snapshots of a huge team, top right, working on a medical device for burns patients. It's a skin printing robot that I was working on in Sydney. But for me, I don't want to be most of these jobs. I want to be the person who's looking at the oscilloscope, understanding like the velocity profile of the robot from these triggers that I made it put out. And that's like the fun part for me. It's different for everyone, but to see that that fun part of like doing electronics and robotics is in so many jobs, so many applications. I'm working on a new robot now. And well, I'm now working on a different robot that has cardiovascular diagnostic applications. And so it's like you can cross all of these different fields with the one skill set. That's why I love engineering, and I get out of bed to pull that confused face every day at my code or my circuit and be like, what is wrong with this? Like, not for everyone, but it's definitely for me.
That's awesome. Thank you, Deanna. That was great. Glen, Jen, and Patience, do y'all want to share kind of what pushes you to keep going and some inspiration for our audience?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's simple in the medical device field. It's all about the patients, right? If we can put patients first, everything else kind of falls into place. And so it's just trying to figure out different solutions to large unmet clinical needs is what I get up every morning to try to tackle. There's a lot of obstacles in our way to be able to do that. But what I'm excited about is, to see what the people in the audience today dream up. Technology is evolving so quickly these days. And so I feel like every other day you hear of a new breakthrough, new technology coming out. How is AI going to impact what we're doing? So yeah, just excited to see how healthcare is going to just exponentially grow and evolve into a safer, healthier world. So it's been great.
That's awesome. Patience or Jen?
Yes, please, I'm here. Okay. Location was where I'm me each morning to keep going in the current thought. It's gonna go with the story which happened to me before I joined Zipline. I was working in one of the provincial hospitals, and there was a mother who was about to deliver a baby in the operating theater, and she got a problem of bleeding, and she was bleeding the blood at that time. So the doctors call me to get them the oxygen cylinder to connect to the anesthesia machine, and yet I had to go with it. And I have seen how the situation was at that moment, where they were struggling and they were out of all the blood that they had at that time. They ordered the blood at Zipline, and the blood got delivered to the hospital like in 15 minutes, and they injected the blood to the patient, and I have seen how she got in the normal situation where we're stressful, seeing that the patient is about to live. That's the story which always encouraged me each morning to go to work as a plan every morning, because I have seen it saving people's lives in life, and also I have seen that it's fitting my career ambition of working with the organization which uses the healthcare technology to save people's lives or to have an impact on the society. The most exciting part of my journey so far is how I found the science technology in the team as well. And while I'm looking forward, I just want to keep following my passion of working with the organization that they uses the healthcare technology to bring the big impact to the society. Apart from that, I'm also want to join the Zipline team, which do the manufacturing, to use my manufacturing skills to build up the zip or the drone. Yes, that's awesome.
Thanks, Patience. And thank you, Deanna, for sharing the link to the video about Zipline. It is really great work. And I think everyone should watch it and read about it as well. And last but not least, Jen, do you want to share with us kind of what keeps you going?
Oh, what keeps me going is cells as medicine. We've demonstrated now they can work. Emily Whitehead, first kid ever treated with CAR T cells, is 10 years out and considered cured. What keeps me going every day is the fact that there's so much work to do to expand that to other applications. So it's beyond just liquid tumors, to engineer cells to do so much more than what now that we know we can engineer them and do that. The oyster has opened up, and a big part of that is how are we going to manufacture these cells such that they can be accessible. Not just to a handful of people from an indication point of view, but also globally. How do you make these in a scaled, efficient manner such that they enable everyone, humanity in general? And it's a big challenge, but it's a worthy one of working on.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And I think I want to just thank everyone for their time. I think this was so great, so insightful. And I do want to reemphasize to keep in mind that you are a scientist, you are an engineer. If you put your mind to it, seek out resources, seek out your network. And I think the last thing to summarize is thinking of the global impact you can have and how your technology or what you're working on can serve others in line with EWH's mission. So thank you.